I feel like at almost every stage of life, there's always something when you look out that makes you feel like you should be somewhere other than where you're at. Most people start the new year, I think, asking the wrong question, right? We sit down in January or even at the end of December and we ask, what do I want to do this year? Right? What do I want to accomplish? What goal should I set? And I think we should have a different starting point. Don't ask, what do I want to do? I think we should instead ask, all right, if you clicked on this video, chances are at some point recently, the thought has crossed your mind that you could be or should be further along by now. And I personally completely get that. In all honesty, this video is really a message to myself, kind of a form of self-therapy. But in this video, I want to share some frameworks that I've learned and how I approach setting goals that make them a little bit more, actually make them achievable. And that I can promise by the end of this video, you'll have new frameworks for how to think through goals. But before I do, I want to share this story. I was invited to a going away party for the son of a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. And at the stage of his life, he's doing something different than what most people his age would be doing. He's not doing just the next thing, and when I asked him about it, he said he was still figuring it out. And honestly, I was really excited for him. I remember at his age, that was exactly what I did. I just did the next thing that I thought was supposed to be done. I went to college, I majored in what I thought I was supposed to major in, but soon realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And maybe 2.5 years in, I started to get a better sense of what I did want to do. And so I changed my major. And that change set me back almost 1.5 years. And so something at a time in my life that was supposed to take 4 years took me 5.5. And from then on, I never could shake the feeling that I was somehow behind. Right. Fast forward, I'm a little bit older. This is after college. And I'd made another one of those decisions, right? I had met a group of friends and there was an opportunity for me to pursue pharmaceuticals. And if you know anything about pharmaceuticals, there's a lot of money to be made there. But instead of doing that, I made a decision to pursue a program that I felt would be foundational for the way that I would see the world. It was important to me to have a good lens that I could see things through and then put things in their proper categories, right? And so it was important for me to do that so that it would help me navigate whatever else would come in the future. And so I got into the program, and then afterward I started grad school and went to seminary. But by the time I finished that program, I was about 1 year in to seminary. I'm trying to pay for it all myself at the time. And I just remember this overwhelming feeling I could have been much further by now, right? Literally, I was curled up on the couch in a friend's apartment in such a depressive state, right? Because I thought I was so behind, right? And if you're in your 30s or 40s watching this, you're probably thinking that's crazy, right? 27 is super young. And yes, I would agree with you. But you couldn't tell me that back then. I knew people younger than I was who seemed like they were on a path that was so set, right? And I'm thankful that I had good friends and a mentor who talked me off a ledge. But here was the point. I feel like at almost every stage of life, there's always something when you look out that makes you feel like you should be somewhere other than where you're at. You should be further than you are. And thus you always feel behind, always playing catch up. And then you get to the end of the year feeling okay, I'm gonna go into the new year. I'm gonna get caught up. I'm gonna be back on track. The problem is that feeling never really goes away. And if there's one thing I can tell you to help reset and reframe that thinking going into the new year, it's this. You are not behind, right? You're just on your own path, right? And I know some of you might be in your early 20s, maybe even younger, feeling the exact same way because some of your friends are getting married early. Some of your friends get married right out of high school. I've seen it, 19, 20, 21, getting married and having kids, and it feels like they've already charted their path, right? It seems like they have their whole life charted out. They've got jobs lined up, they've got internships, and you're just catching wind of AI, even catching wind of AI and how it's creating like 20 something year old millionaires, some billionaires. And social just has us all like comparing and benchmarking and feeling the exact same way. Like I should be further along by now, right? I should have a little more figured out by now. First, I would say stop shooting all over yourself, right? I should have done this. I should have done that. Like we all need to hear that. I needed to hear that, right? Social media is one of the greatest gifts to our generation, but in the same way that often your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, social media being such an incredible tool also makes it one of the most dangerous, most distracting, and most depressing tools of our generation, right? So let me say it again. You are not behind. I had a favorite professor who used to say, as long as there's life, there's hope. And especially if you're in your 20s or younger, again, 30s, 40s, even, there's so much life in front of you. Plus, especially the younger of you watching this, like you have in your possession the greatest asset anyone can have: time, right? So let me dispel the myth of being behind and then share these goal setting frameworks that I've talked about that have helped me, that I still used to think through them, so that you can recalibrate your timeline and then start the new year with more fresh and sustainable energy. Feel me? Okay. So let's start with the lie of feeling behind, right? The idea of being behind would presume that others must be ahead, and that would presume that there is some sort of track and everyone everywhere is on that same track running towards the exact same finish line, right? You can even hear already how silly that sounds. And the easy answer would be social media is the problem, right? And it certainly is part of the problem, but I think people were doing this well before social media really became a thing. Again, I would feel this way before social media doom scrolling was really that kind of a thing. Why? In my case, or at least in my opinion, I think it's a toxic form of comparison. I don't think comparison is bad in and of itself, right? I think you learn to be human by watching other humans, right? But there is a toxic form of comparison where you fall into the trap of believing what someone has is for you, right? And I think that's what the Bible would call coveting, right? You're looking at someone else's life and wanting what you see in that moment with no sense of the layers of experience, the variables, time, work, struggle that created that moment. And then you're seeing a page in someone else's book and comparing it to the one you're still writing and not realizing that the two of you are in completely different genres, right? So it doesn't really matter what chapter you're looking at of someone else's, right? The stories are always going to be completely different because the styles are completely different. Yes, there might be overlap, but a photography book and an encyclopedia both have pictures in them, but those pictures serve two very different purposes, right? The collection of your experiences, the setbacks, the accomplishments, choices, both good and bad, jobs you've taken, friends you've made, mentors, all of that. They're all they're all intended to help you reach a point where you begin to better understand who you are, right? That's the journey. Life is about understanding who we are in the unique way that our experiences and skills and struggles help to influence the world through those we encounter to be who and what God intended it to be, right? There's no timeline for that. So when you set goals every year, they should consider time, but the way you do that is really important. And that's what I want to show you, right? But we need to talk about this first. Most people start the new year, I think, asking the wrong question, right? We sit down in January or even at the end of December and we ask, what do I want to do this year, right? What do I want to accomplish? What goal should I set? And I think we should have a different starting point. Don't ask, what do I want to do? I think we should instead ask, who do I want to become, right? Answering that question will bring far more clarity to all the others you'll have. And you'll have a much better reason as to why you want to do something, right? And having a strong why will always give you the fuel to push through and get through whatever it is you want to do. Because it's not a matter of if you'll face resistance achieving what you want to do, it's when, right? And that why will always be the thing that helps you fight against it. And so I'll give you an example. Like, let's say the beginning of the year, you write down, I want to meet somebody this year, right? I had very common goal, legitimate desire. I had it for many Januaries before I got married. But could we be putting the cart before the horse, right? So let's say I'm your homie, right? You're watching this video. So like, let's just say that I'm the homie. You come to me and you're like, hey, I really want to meet somebody this year. And then very likely I would ask you, I go, okay, who is the kind of person you want to meet, right? Be as specific as you can. Like, what do they spend their time doing? What do they value? What do they want to do with their life, right? Now, based on that answer and who that person is, who is the kind of person that person would be attracted to, right? You see where I'm going? Like, are you that person right now? It's always going to come back to, who do you want to become? Who do you need to become? And then when you think about it that way, it really becomes just a matter of maturity, right? Paul writes to the people in Thessalonica, which is in the book of Thessalonians in your Bible. And he talks about God's will for their life. That's probably another video about how do I know God's will, but he talks about God's will for their life being sanctification. And that word sanctification is a pretty big theological word for the ongoing process of becoming more mature, in the sense of like more whole and more aligned with who you were created to be. And to be specific about this, we are the sort of poetic masterpiece created by God in Jesus Christ for good works that were laid beforehand and set before us so that we would walk in them. That is the path. That's the journey. That's what we're trying to discover, right? In life, each and every year of it is about uncovering that path and walking in it so that we become more and more of who we actually are. And the clearer we can get about that path, and the clearer we can get about what maturity looks like for us, our skills, our expertise, relationships, hobbies, spirituality, faith, the better we then enter each year, understanding that the game we're playing is an infinite one, right? And each year is simply a season to work out a new area of growth information. So then you're not worried about like whether you make it to the gym every day, because you know that in order to become the kind of athlete that you actually need to become, or if it's the idea of trying to be a healthier version of yourself so that you can keep up with your kids or not get hurt when you pick them up, like it's more about joining the right gym because of the community that you'll be a part of that will be a much more powerful motivator than your own sort of like self-shaming will, right? And maybe just finding the right gym this year is the goal you need to set, right? Not the arbitrary health goal trap that we always tend to set, then forget, right? So start with identity, right? Who do you want to become? Answer that question first, and then use these frameworks to set clear goals and steps for your path along that way, right? So here are the frameworks. Often when you hear about setting goals, they often refer to goals that need to be SMART, right? It's the most classic goal setting framework around, right? And SMART stands for specific, where your goals need to be clear and not vague, usually having a number tied to them. They need to be measurable, right? So you can track progress. This one definitely needs to have a number. It needs to be achievable in the sense that it's realistic and something you can actually do. Relevant, where it actually matters and aligns with your bigger vision, which we'll come back to. And then time bound, which again, if we're talking about something you want to complete in a year, that's one part of it, right? That's time bound, but maybe it might be sooner than a year. So you can consider that. Been around forever because it works. And they're super helpful to at least create clarity. Like I feel like SMART goals are a great place to start, right? And I didn't realize personally how bad I was at this, right? Turns out I've been pretty notorious for setting super ambiguous goals. Like I'd come to the beginning of a year or beginning of any season, be like, oh, I want to start a podcast, right? And there's probably a conversation to be had about desires versus goals, but this is what I would do. I'd be like, oh, I want to start a podcast. And then I would start thinking, but I would never really get more specific than that. I would just start doing stuff. And it's no longer surprising. It's not really surprising um, to see like how ambiguous goals just never get done, right? As simple as the statement might sound to just start a podcast this year, like it doesn't really have much substance, right? Instead, if I said something like, this year, I want to publish 24 episodes of a real estate podcast to help people acquire their first property, that's a completely different thing, right? It's way more clear, way more energizing. It's got purpose to it. There's meaning behind it. There's like a connection there with like something I want to help people achieve, and that makes the entire thing way more motivating, right? Now, what normally happens when people set goals is they often keep them to themselves, right? And that's honestly a symptom of an even bigger problem regarding community and how well people stay connected, which is another video for another time. But I will say this: community and culture is a multiplier. If you don't have people, you will never reach the levels you're capable of, because people often hold the keys that unlock new levels inside you, right? Relationships will always be your highest return on investment, full stop, right? But this does take me into the second framework, and why I like it in conjunction with the first, right? What helps keep goals top of mind is the frequency with which you talk about them, right? That's why friends and community matter so much, right? So people need to know who you are, who you're trying to become, and what you're doing to get there, right? So think fast, FAST, when it comes to your goals. And these ones come from MIT, right? And MIT is like at the forefront of a lot of things. And so when I saw these, I was like, okay, this is important, right? And the idea is when you set goals, make sure they're frequently discussed. That's the F. Talk about them regularly. And when you do, that's what keeps them top of mind, right? Make sure they're ambitious, right? Um, goals, I mean, if goals are too easy, it doesn't really help with growth, right? Goals should stretch you, right? Just like going to the gym, the pain in the beginning is the kind of pain that leads to growth, right? Not all pain is bad, right? The S is for specific, same as SMART, right? Clarity does matter. And then T for transparent, right? Other people should know what you're working on, right? That way there's accountability. And again, it goes back to like why community is so important, right? So people know who you are, they know who you want to become, and they know what you're working on to get there, right? It's both transparent, but it's also vulnerable. And I do get that. Vulnerability does like leave you open, right? It looks like when people know what you're trying to do, they can use that against you, or if you're not moving at the pace that you thought you would, there might be a risk of shame. I get that. It's not easy, but again, there's no better return on investment than if you find the right people, right? So it's important. Find the right people, make sure they're people that you can frequently discuss these goals with, and they will hold you accountable. And I'm telling you, people will be the ones who unlock. You never know, right? Like who will be the person that connects you with someone else who can accelerate your growth, right? And so with that, there's one more that I feel like rounds it all out. Um, and when you think about it, if you think like, okay, well, I know I'm supposed to be specific, but what is specific action? How specific am I supposed to be? Right. And how do I know how ambitious is too ambitious or not ambitious enough? Like, how do I know what's actually achievable? Right. So that's why I like this other one. It's called Nice. Where if you haven't read the book Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal, I think it's worth the read. I think it's worth having in your library. But in that, he coined a goal setting framework called NICE, NICE, which is near term, right? So when you're thinking about how specific, we might say we want to set a goal for a year, right? January to December. But that near term idea of like, well, if I know there's something I want to achieve over the course of a year, is can I break that down into quarters, right? Every 3 months, right? So now you have a shorter time horizon. And it doesn't feel so overwhelming, and you can see it, right? You can see the finish line a little bit sooner, right? Second, when it comes to something that's a bit more controllable, think about things that you do, right? The I is for set goals that are input based, right? You focus on your own actions that you actually do and not outcomes. I used to work in the music business with a friend of mine, And we used to always say, when we'd be in the middle of a project, we'd say, work hard and trust God with the results, right? All you can control are the emails you write, the calls you make, um, the media you post, the videos you upload. You can't control who watches it. You can't control who buys. You can't control, you can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do, right? So when you're thinking about nice goals, when they're near term, you can put a timeline that's a little bit closer to you that you can see, and then you can focus on the things that you actually do, your own inputs, right? That's what makes it, which is the C part, more controllable, right? Things you have agency over, in order to hit that particular goal, right? So the input based goals or actions actually make them more controllable. But the E is the one that is interesting, right? So NICE, choose things that are energizing, right? The whole premise behind the book Feel Good Productivity is the idea that you get more done when you're in a better mood. So when you're thinking about setting goals, the idea behind nice goals is that they're closer to you, right? So even if you're trying to think about something you want to do in a year, you can break that down to something that you can track over 3 months, and something that's going to be based on your own actions, not someone else's outcome, not some sort of money you want to make. You can't control any of that stuff, but you can control your own behavior, right? And so it's input based and it's controllable just off of that. And then choosing things that actually excite you, which is going to be more motivating for you to actually do the work, right? And so I like nice goals for that reason, because it feels that much more sustainable. And goals typically, like, they often feel like chores, and maybe that's part of the reason why they don't often get done and why people like quit them so soon. But I don't think they should necessarily be that way, right? I was watching the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, and he was interviewing Chris Williamson. And if you know either of those two, it's kind of funny because Steve Bartlett has the #2 podcast in the world behind Joe Rogan. And then Chris Williamson has the #8. So it's like a podcaster interviewing a podcaster, which is funny. But he brought up some interesting stats about like New Year's resolutions and goals. And the first one was this: like almost a quarter of people like quit their New Year's resolutions by the end of the first week. Right? Think about that. By January 1st, you have a goal set. By the 8th, it's done. Right? And people just quit, which is kind of wild to me. Right? About half of them will quit by the end of the month, and less than 10% of them will stick with it to the end of the year. Just 10%, right? And what that says to me is this: like, don't set don't set goals that feel like chores, right? Make it about transformation, and then use these frameworks to just build those up brick by brick, right? Use SMART goals as a framework to lay the foundation to just clarify what it is you're going after, right? Then use FAST to make sure it stretches you, but keeps you connected so that you're frequently talking about it, right? That's the key. When you create a goal, make sure people know what you're trying to do. Somebody, right? Because sometimes, like I said before, you don't know who someone might know that could accelerate your own growth. Right? You just don't know who's connected to who. And that's why, again, relationships will always be your greatest return on investment, right? And then make them nice in the sense that you make sure that they're yours, right? Your timeline, your inputs, your control, your energy, right? So that's your stat for setting goals. Make them smart, fast, nice. And then don't worry if it feels like, that's a lot to remember. I created a guide that you can download, right? To just help you walk through all of this, right? It's always going to start with the question, who do you want to become, right? That's always going to be the start for me. Whenever you hear anything from me, it's like, who do you want to become? Then from there, you might think about what you want to achieve, right? Remember the R in SMART having to do with things being like relevant towards your vision? This is that vision, right? Who do you want to become? That should always be the starting point. Then from there, it could guide you through prompts to help you build goals around that identity that are all smart, fast, and nice. That link is in the description. You can download it, print it out, fill it in. I think if you do that work, I'm pretty certain you'll have a much more concrete path for at least this year, so that when you look back at it in December, it'll most definitely feel like a year that was well lived, right? So with all that said, let me encourage you one more time. you are not behind, right? You're just on your own path. Like, don't compare, but do be curious. Like, if you see someone crushing it, find a way to learn what they did or how they're doing it, and then see about ways to apply those principles to your own path. Like, don't just fall into the trap of believing that your life should look like someone else's, or should look like theirs or be where they are. Like, as you embrace the path that you're on, remember the people that people often overestimate what they can do in a year, but they completely underestimate what they can do in 3 to 5. Right? You don't need to catch up. You just need to keep growing up, right? And then use these guides, do the work, become more of who you are, and then make this year life well lived, right? If you made it this far, like, I super appreciate you for like giving me, I understand how valuable attention is. And so I appreciate you giving me that. There's one thing that I would ask you at the end of this video, if any of it was helpful, if you would give it a like, that would be great. It is one thing, it is an input-based thing that does have an impact on how this video gets shared and delivered to other people. So the more it's liked, the more it gets delivered and the more people can see it. So if it helped you, give it a like, I would appreciate it. And then I'd love to hear some of your goals. So if you want to drop some of those in the comments, I would love to see them. But otherwise, thanks again for watching. Subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you